hello everybody. My name is Val. I'm one of the co-founders and one of the owners of Golden State ADUs. So what we do is essentially we build these, backyard homes. Sometimes they're in the front, sometimes they're on the side. Today we're going to touch on ADUs as well as missing middle housing. Are you guys pretty familiar with what missing middle housing entails, or is it a new concept for most of us here? Okay, perfect. So we'll talk about missing middle housing, and I think it's very important to touch on this just because, so even the last time that I spoke on here, that was before I kind of really took even a deeper dive into ADUs and just the space and how everything is changing in Sacramento specifically. And missing middle housing is essentially what's guiding Sacramento's policymaking and Sacramento's vision for the next 15 years, right? So there's even like a handbook that Sacramento city planners put out. It's called the 2040 Sacramento City Plan, and it essentially talks about how the landscape of Sacramento is going to be completely changing. So there's a lot of different things that are going to be getting incorporated into Sacramento, and that's what we're going to be talking about. And let's see, okay, there it is. So before we talk about missing middle housing and why Sacramento is pushing so heavily on it, I think it's important to touch base on why they're pushing it, right? So the reason why they're pushing it is the Sacramento landscape is obviously changing, right? A lot of people are getting priced out of the areas that they're currently in, right? Areas like San Francisco, San Diego, Los Angeles. A lot of people are getting priced out, and a lot of people are making their way to Sacramento to call it their new home, right? So the Sacramento region is projected to add approximately 580,000 new residents by 2050, right? So that's 2.6 million that we currently have to 3.1 million that they're expecting to make a home by 2050, right? So that's a lot of people that are going to be moving into our cities, right? In order to accommodate that growth, Sacramento needs to build about 278,000 new homes by then, right? And that's not even the craziest part. The craziest part, I think, is that 67% of all new housing is expected to be focused on infill and suburban areas rather than outward expansion, right? So in the past, and this is something that we've been doing a lot, is Sacramento's been expanding outwards, right? So they've been building, you will see communities like in Lincoln, right? West Roseville, areas like that they're building out there. So the new housing that they're trying to focus on, right? And this comes back to the 2040 Sacramento plan on what the city planners are trying to push for, is infill housing, right? It's 67% of these new 278,000 homes they're trying to put into neighborhoods that are already established, right? And that's absolutely insane, right? So instead of going this way, we're going to be going now upwards and doing these infill areas. Also, the demographic is changing. For example, by 2050, 85% of households will have no children. That's what they're expecting. So that is absolutely insane, right? 85% of new households will have no children, and 1 in 5 Americans will be over the age of 65. What these two facts tell us is that people will not, there won't be a necessity as big for houses that are about 2,000 square foot, with 3-4 bedrooms. They're not going to be as much need for those kind of houses as there will be for these smaller houses, which Sacramento is pushing for in terms of missing middle housing, right? So what is missing middle housing, and what are the benefits of missing middle housing? So missing middle housing is not a new concept. It's something that's been around for a long time. It was very popular in the early 1900s, especially 1920s in New York, Detroit, Chicago, areas like that. It was very, very popular, right? So duplexes, fourplexes, cottage courts, and townhomes is essentially what these cities were focused on. And after World War II, the American dream came into play, right? And everybody wanted the white picket fence. They wanted their backyard, and single-family homes essentially took over and phased out those missing middle houses, right? So now it's either you get a single-family home or you go into a huge, big apartment complex, and there's no really options in between. So that's what missing middle housing is aimed to essentially combat, right? What are the benefits of missing middle housing? In missing middle housing, it also essentially ADUs are part of missing middle housing. So the benefits are multi-generational living, right? So I used to say about 50% of our clientele was people that are either bringing mom and dad home, or mom and dad are taking the kids out of the house and putting them in the backyard. Now I would say it's about like 60 to 70% of our clientele. It's a very, very popular. Even big builders like Lennar, right? Like now they're starting to focus on these next gen houses, if you guys have seen them. So it's houses that are with a JADU to the side. So you see that even when big builders are getting into that kind of market, you see that there's a need for it, right? And it's a very growing need. And like I said before, it was like 50% that I would say that is our clientele. Now it's about 60 to 70% are people that want to go ahead and do that multi-generational living. Rental income is probably, I would say, about the other 30%, right? It's a very, very popular concept in the real estate world. In the rental game as well. And I think it's only going to grow as well as more and more people actually realize the benefits of ADUs and how much of a cash flow that they actually bring. So rental income is a huge one. They offer great returns. I always bring up this example because this is the one that we built an ADU that I still keep up with the gentleman to this day, and he always tells me how it's going. So he built an ADU. It was about $177,000. It was 650 square feet, Taft Street, Sacramento. Not a nice area. Like, you're going to lock you're going to make sure your door's locked on your car before you go inside. But he's renting it out for $1,800 a month, and his payment on it is about $980, and that's after taxes, insurance, and all of that. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there. So that rental ROI is absolutely insane, right? So you're getting about 12.4% on that ADU, which in perspective, to get the same type of returns, you'd have to get a house for about $600,000, rent it out for $6,400, which obviously you're just not going to get. Another reason is downsizing and retirement, right? So these are two very, very big reasons, and this goes back to the fact that 85% of households are not going to have children by 2050, and 1 in 5 Americans is over the age of 65 by 2050, right? So downsizing and retirement is a huge thing that's also leading cities to try to incorporate smaller houses, because a lot of people don't need 3-4 bedroom houses, right? Especially if 85% of them are not going to have children, there's no need. And for retirement, a lot of people are selling their primary home, moving into a smaller home to build an ADU in the back, rents out the primary, or vice versa, right? So it's less to take care of. You don't need as much space. It's easier to clean and things like that. And then also you can rent out the unit as well. So that's the benefits of missing middle housing. Again, I would say that the biggest ones is the multi-generational living and the rental income. So those are very big players in the game. So this is what missing middle housing is, and this is actually straight from the 2040 Sacramento playbook, right? So essentially, this is what we have now mostly, which is the detached single-family houses, and we have the mid-rise apartments, right? And all of this stuff in between, that has essentially been forgotten, and Sacramento has not really been incorporating that whatsoever. So now they're backtracking, and they're trying to reintroduce this missing middle housing, right? Which is essentially duplexes, fourplexes, courtyard buildings, and so on. So that's essentially what Sacramento is going to be focused on for the next 15 years, right? And again, I just want to emphasize the fact that 278,000 homes are needed, and 67% of them are projected to be built in already established communities, right, in infill areas, which is pretty crazy, I would say, right? So it's going to get a lot more dense. And also, even with the 2040, if you read the 2040 book as well, essentially what's guiding Sacramento is they're trying to get rid of density almost completely, right? So there's not going to be such thing as, this area is zoned for single family, or this is for multifamily. Essentially, they're trying to make it almost a free-for-all by 2040, and where you can they enable builders to build more. So these are the the missing middle homeowner and investor-friendly bills that we're going to be talking about. Some of them are relatively new. Some of them are as new as about 4 months, last October. Actually, I guess it's 5 months now. And some of them are a little bit older. The oldest bill here is the AB 68, which is the California bill, California ADU bill, which was passed in 2019. So this is all relatively new information, right? So this is the big one, right? This is kind of what started the chain reaction. And again, this is the ADU bill, right? So what this changes, before 2019, it was relatively hard to build an ADU, right? There was a lot of restrictions, there was a lot of pushback from cities. Now what this bill enabled was local jurisdictions must allow ADUs, so they have no choice. They now have to allow ADUs no matter where you are, HOA. It doesn't matter what your neighbor says. Your neighbor can go complain, sign petitions. Essentially, nobody can stop you from building at least one ADU. The approval time frame got shortened, right? So it's now 60 days. Before, you could be held up in permitting for literally months and months and months. Now the approval time did get shortened to 60 days. There's now no minimum lot size requirements. As well as it eliminated parking requirements, which was a big one too, because before, if you built an ADU, now all of a sudden you need a designated parking spot for that ADU, which this bill got rid of. Lot coverage limits, some cities, they still do impose lot coverage, but it's only up to a certain amount. So if you can, it's a 40% lot coverage, but if you can't build they'll allow you to build at least 800 square feet. So even if that 800 square feet is almost covering the whole lot, they'll still allow you to build it, right? So some cities do still have certain lot coverage limits. And also the big one that it did was it removed owner occupancy, which paved the way for investors to start getting in and building these ADUs. And it removed HOA restrictions. So removing HOA restrictions was very nice. Go ahead.
Can I ask you if your HOA restrictions say still can build an ADU without HOA?
So you're asking if an HOA tells you that you can't build it, can you still build it? Absolutely, yes. So we've had to do, so what we had to actually do before is we had to get the HCD involved, which is like a department that Gavin Newsom signed into law in 2000, literally, well, not even in 2000, they signed it into last October, October 10th. So we had times where the cities would try to push back. So for example, we have a project in Lincoln right now that we're almost finished up with, and it's an HOA community. They tried telling us that we can't build it there, our community doesn't allow it, and we had to get the HCD involved, and they went ahead and fought that battle for us, and essentially now we're almost done with that ADU. They even went as far as now making, because before they would say, the first wave was they would tell HOA communities that you can't build an ADU, right? So what the HOA communities did is they're like, okay, we're just gonna pretty much fee you to death, right? Like they're gonna impose so much fees where it's just not gonna be, and there's no benefit in building that ADU. But now, again, Gavin Newsom went back in last October, he signed it into law that they can't impose financial burdens like that on the community. So we had an HOA community in a different area, actually not in Lincoln, I forget what area this was in, but they tried to impose like $10,000 or $12,000 in just HOA fees to build an ADU, and we got all of them dropped. Again, had to get the HCD involved, but again, this is all relatively new, so there are cities and there are areas that they do try to push back and see if you'll just give up the fight, right? Because a lot of people, they do give up. They'll hear no and they're like, oh, okay, well, I guess you can't build it. So a lot of people do give up on that fight. Another thing that this bill did is it reduced setbacks. So now you have 4-foot side setbacks, as well as you have to be at least 6 feet away from the primary home. So ADUs, the way that they work, if this is your first time hearing, so the way that the ADUs work is they all interconnect essentially, all the utilities get interconnected with the primary dwelling. So your water, you tap in right before it enters the house, you tap in with the water. The sewer, same thing with the sewer. Electrical, it's interconnected with so you get a sub panel, 100 amps on the ADU, and you interconnect it with the primary dwelling. It does get its own address, so it's a completely separate dwelling, gets its own mail, you can even get its own trash, everything like that. So it is a completely separate unit at the end of the day, right? So the goal of this is they wanted people to start pretty much picking up the city slack and building these homes to infill these areas. A big one that changed, and this is still actually very, very new too, the AB 1033, this is actually one of the bills that I think most excited about out of all the bills. So we'll touch a little bit on this, and this is the California ADU Sale and Home Ownership Expansion Act. So what this one is, and this one got passed in about 2023. Right, so what this bill does is it requires the city or county to adopt an ordinance implementing the separate sale option. So this bill opens up the way to, you can now build an ADU and sell it separately, right? So for example, in Seattle, this is actually, what's interesting too is that Sacramento is kind of copying Seattle's playbook on what they're doing, and they're implementing it. They're just implementing it a lot slower here than they did there. But Seattle also had this bill passed. They call it differently, but it's essentially to be able to sell an ADU separately, and they passed this bill in 2019 in Seattle, right? So we passed it in 2023, they passed it in 2019. In Seattle, last year, or actually I guess it's 2 years now, 2024, 60% of all ADUs built were sold as condominiums. So here there's been like 2 that have sold so far because their cities are still pretty slow to adapt to making it possible. But in Seattle, they did it a little bit faster, and now 60% of all ADUs that are built are getting sold. So they're specifically getting built to sell. And even in San Jose, I actually just seen a video of this recently. I actually sent it to my partners literally yesterday. The property that got sold in San Jose, it was an ADU that sold for $1.6 million. Which is absolutely insane. Like the guy pretty much pocketed at least over $1 million, because there's no way that the ADU cost $600,000 to build, but he pocketed essentially over $1 million just by utilizing his side yard, splitting the property, and then selling it. So it's an absolute game changer, and I can see now why Seattle, 60% of all homes are sold.
Good question.
Yeah.
If I built an ADU, how fast I can divide the property?
Well, so you're trying to do, so with this bill, it's not a lot split. So you don't have to split the lot to sell it separately here. What you're probably talking about, there's a different bill, it's called SB 9, which is like a lot split bill, but this one is not for lot split. So this one is essentially, it's sold as a condominium. So again, over here it says not a lot split, it's a condominium or common interest ownership structure. So you build an ADU, it's not split, it's still on one property, so it's sold as a condominium. So the rules are to sell it. Again, most cities, for example, San Jose, they have their own checklist that you follow, and some cities are a little bit slower to implement the checklists. But essentially, for example, in San Jose, what they require you to do is they require you to reach out to the utility provider, right? Let them know that, hey, I'm selling this property. So then you have to create a contract. How are the utilities going to be split between the two owners? You have to create a contract for like CC&Rs, almost like a homeowners association, with how common space is going to be split, right? Like who gets to park on, whose parking spot is this side, whose parking spot is this side, who owns this side of the yard, who owns this side of the yard. So you do have to create some sort of CC&Rs so that everyone knows exactly what they're getting. And then from there, you essentially can sell it completely separate, which is an absolute game changer. Again, in 2024, 60% of all ADUs built in Seattle were sold as condominiums, right? So cities like San Jose, Los Angeles, Berkeley, and Sacramento have all opted in for this bill. Our city, Sacramento specifically, they're still a little bit slower to adapt like the actual checklists of it. San Jose right now is sort of paving the way with that. And they're starting to see an uptick in people building these ADUs for sale. And I believe in just following what Seattle is doing, because essentially in Seattle, they started out the same way, right? They started out with, they allowed ADUs, and then after they started allowing them to sell separately, it completely changed the game. And the majority of the ADUs that are getting built there now are essentially pretty much by investors, right? They're building the ADUs and then they're selling them off. Also, fun fact, in Seattle, actually, ADUs beat regular housing 2-to-1 right now. So for every one regular house that's getting built in Seattle, there's 2 ADUs that are getting built. So it's a complete game changer. In LA, it's about 1-to-3. So for every three regular houses, it's 1 ADU. Also, in Sacramento, actually, or just all of California, 20% of all new construction last year, or 2024, was ADUs. It's honestly probably even higher now. So SB 9, this is the lot split bill, if you wanted to have a question about that. So what this one does is it essentially allows, it's called the California Housing Opportunity and More Efficiency Home Act. And SB 9, what this allows you to do is it allows you to essentially turn what used to be one lot into 2 to 4 homes. So what you can do is you can completely split the lot, build homes on the second lot, as well as build home on the front lot. So there's no CEQA, so which is a California Environmental Quality Act, so they can't really stop you by saying that, oh, you know, it's not good for the environment or this and that. Owner occupancy is required if you split the lot. So there's different ways to do this bill, right? So the first way to do this bill is say that you have a single family home, and again, all cities and jurisdictions, they have their own little implementations of it, and sometimes you'll have to almost fight the city in order for them to allow you to push it through, because they're still pretty slow to adapt. Again, this is I guess there's a benefit of being first, is that you get to learn about it, but the downside of it is that you're still in the discovery phase with the city, so they make it a little bit harder on you, right? Because all the systems are not yet in place. But essentially what this bill does is, imagine you have one home, right, on your property. What you can do is you can use SB 9 to now build a second primary dwelling. So now you can have 2 dwellings on that property, and then each dwelling can go ahead and also get an ADU. So you can essentially have, and this works in single family residential areas. So you have one single family residential area, you build a second SB 9 unit, which buy it, right? So now you have 2 units, and now each unit can also get an ADU. So you're turning what used to be 1 home into 4. Now you can take it a step further and you can split the lot if you have the space for it, right? If you have the land, and duplicate whatever you did on the first lot on the second lot. So essentially you can turn what used to be 1 home into 8 homes, right? So again, some cities, they will give you a hard time to push this through. Like in the Bay Area, we were working with an investor named Eddie, a very smart guy, but we literally, he's like fighting the city. He's actually like was showing us a lot of things too. This is how we got really introduced to a lot of these bills, and this was a while ago. And we're essentially almost helping these cities to interpret these bills, right? So a lot of them are pretty slow to adapt. Again, the benefit of this bill is that it's minimal local discretion and it's ministerial approval, right? So again, your neighbors can't get together and start signing a petition to get you to, you know, drop the project or to have somebody stop you from doing the project. Essentially, it's ministerial approval. So if you want to do it and you're doing it by the code and by the book, then essentially nobody can stop you from doing that. Right? Again, this is for single-family residential zoning. And an interesting fact actually is UC Berkeley actually did a study on this, and this was part of the 2040 general plan. And they found out that there's 116,000 eligible parcels in Sacramento that are capable of doing this bill, right? You can use this bill on, which is a pretty big, I think, chunk of parcels, right? 116,000 parcels, I would say, is a pretty significant amount. So I would assume that there's going to be a lot more people that are going to start taking advantage of these bills. And again, this is a very new bill. I believe this one got passed in 2022. So essentially, it's 3 years and a few months old. So usually, what I like to say is that there's like a ricochet effect right before a bill passes and before it really hits the general public. Even with the ADU laws, right? They got passed in 2019, and by 2022, 2023, cities were giving people up to $40,000 just to start the ADU project, right? Right now, actually, in Napa, they have grants that they're giving up to $80,000 to build an ADU, but then you have to rent it out to lower income. So it's like there's a median of that people make in that area, and if you're below that median and you commit to renting it out to them for, I think it's like 5 years, then they'll go ahead and give you a grant up to $80,000 depending on the square footage of the unit that you build. So it's not slowing down, right? So they're still pushing these grants out, and I think that they're going to continue to push them out because they're really heavily focusing on this infill development. So another bill is SB 684. This is an interesting one. This is the Starter Homes Act, right? So this is targeted towards projects with 10 or fewer residential units, and it does not count ADUs, so essentially you can do 10 residential units plus 10 ADUs. Again, depending on the city, right? Sometimes you're gonna have to fight to really have them interpreted it the correct way. And again, it's for subdivisions of 10 or fewer parcels on lots zoned for multifamily. The key word here is that it's for lots zoned for multifamily. And the lots must be 5 acres or less, again, zoned for multifamily. The parcels must be at least 75% already touching developed land. So again, it goes back to Sacramento wanting to fill in those missing areas. So they want areas that are already, there's developments around them, right? There's already houses by them, there's already stores by them. So it can't just be a complete empty lot in the middle of nowhere and you go ahead and use this bill. So this is made for, infill development in areas that are already developed. The nice thing about this one, okay, minimum lot size is 600 square feet, so it doesn't have to be a big lot at all. And you can start building once your tentative map is approved. So it makes the building process a lot faster, which of course is a lot more lucrative for investors, right? And again, the main goal of this bill is to make it easy and fast to build small 10-unit housing projects on already zoned multifamily land. This bill got passed in about, I believe, 2023, and I don't even touch too much on this bill anymore because right after it got passed, they went back and revamped this bill and made it even easier to build. So they went ahead and said, okay, it's great that we can do this on multifamily, but let's take it a step further, do it on single family as well, which is what SB 1123 is. And just to show how new this bill is, I remember we were working with a lady in Roseville, and she was looking to do this bill. She was looking to develop a single family parcel. So I went out and I did all the research that I could, and I was okay, I think I got the gist of it, but I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna take a trip to the building department, and I'm actually gonna talk to them and see if I'm missing anything. And when I came to the building department, I told them, I was like, hey, can I talk to somebody about SB 1123? They looked at me like I was crazy. They had no idea what I was talking about. So I'm like, okay, can you call whoever's in charge? Maybe they'll know. They called whoever's in charge, and they had no idea what I was talking about. So I'm like, what's the bill that essentially was born from SB 684? And he's like, oh yeah, like I heard about that. But it just shows how new these bills are when even the building departments themselves are still slow to really educate themselves on these bills, right? Again, a lot of these bills are passed in 2023, and even this bill just got revamped as well. So last time we talked about it. So essentially, I'm jumping too far ahead. Again, this bill expands on SB 684, and it's meant for a vacant lot zoned for single family use can use ministerial subdivision housing rules like SB 684, right? So essentially, you can do a single family dwelling. If there's a single family dwelling and there's space around it, you can essentially go ahead and develop that whole parcel and build up to 10 primary units as well as 10 ADUs. Right now, it's actually very popular in Seattle. So I follow there's these two brothers that are, it's exactly what they're doing. They're buying properties where it's like a rundown home. They tear it down and then they build up. And they've grown pretty quickly. Now they're expanding to different states too that are implementing these same kind of rules. But it is, once it catches steam, a lot of people start jumping on this because it makes sense, right? You can essentially go ahead, you buy a property that has one home on it, you go ahead and you can develop around it and build up to 10 primary units. The lot must be a maximum of 1.5 acres, and the houses must be at least 1,200 square feet, right? So this is made more for the townhomes, so you want to do 2 stories, connected, things like that. And again, you can have up to 10 houses, and ADUs do not count towards the house limit, right? So the last time I talked about this bill actually here was they pretty much essentially, if you wanted to do that, there would be a house, and the house would either have to be vacant for you to do it for the past 3 years, or uninhabitable, right? So the house would have to be so run down that they'd be able, like you could prove like, hey, I can't do anything with this house, I need to tear it down, and essentially now you can use the bill, right? Because they wouldn't just let you get a regular house and build around it. Then they came back, and this was very, very recent. This was actually last, a few months ago, I believe it was like July or like August, something like that, around that time, they created what's called a remainder parcel, right? So now, just because there's a house on the lot, doesn't mean that you have to wait for 3 years for it to be, occupied or uninhabitable. You can now essentially classify that parcel as a remainder parcel and build around it. So it actually makes it a lot easier, right? Because you can imagine it was pretty hard to find properties where it was either run down or uninhabitable for 3 years, right? So now if you find a home that has a nice sized land around it, a nice sized parcel, and there's a property on it, you can classify that property as a remainder parcel, and now you can still go ahead and use this bill to go ahead and develop around that building and build up to 10 units, not counting ADUs. So it's a complete game changer, right, for investing. I think it's gonna, again, just got passed in about 2023, so it's just relatively new. So I believe that once more and more people get to know about these bills and actually see the potential that this holds, it's going to get more and more used, I believe. SB 79, I don't even want to talk too much about this one just yet because there's so much, like even the cities are still fighting back and forth with this. There was protests about this bill. Literally in San Francisco, they were protesting this bill. They were protesting this bill in Los Angeles. So essentially what this bill does is it now establishes state-mandated minimum zoning near transit. So now what you can do is, for example, here what it would work is it would work, for example, in Sacramento, in the city, and of course in Rancho Cordova where the Amtrak is. So essentially you can have where there was a single family home, you can now take that single family home and you can essentially build up to, in Sacramento's case, it won't be 9 stories, it'll be 7 stories. You can build up to 7 stories high, and it depends on, the further you get away from the public transit, the less stories you can build, right? But essentially now it opens up the way for, if you have a single family home, you can now essentially put up an apartment complex where it used to be just a single family zoned property, right? So a lot of people are not happy about it. Of course, it's going to end up, it depends on what side of the stick you're on. If you're the one building it, you're probably thrilled. If it's your neighbor building it, you're probably not too happy with them, right? But
so question, if I have commercial lot building,
mm-hmm.
and it's 1.1 miles from the train station, bus stop, and so on.
That you're gonna be way too limited with that one. You have to be, it's like 0.25 miles, 0.5 miles, 0.75 miles, and it keeps dropping lower and lower. Like if you're 0.25 miles away, it's up to 7 stories high. If you're 0.5 miles away, then it's up to like 5 stories high, and then it just keeps dropping more and more.
Where can I see this information?
It's just online. Like I would just go on and so I read the actual bill that got passed, but it's honestly just it's kind of hard to read, I would say. So the best way to do it honestly is I would just Google SB 79 and see people that have wrote articles on it. And again, this bill, there's still, like, because they passed this bill literally in October 10th of last year. So it's a very, very new bill, and cities are still fighting, the government trying to kind of slow it down, which is what happens with a lot of these bills. A lot of these bills, when they get pushed through, a lot of the cities start going ahead and they start doing pushback on these bills, right? So they're not too happy with these bills, but essentially it will come to the point where they will allow it easier and easier, right? So again, everything here that ties in that we talked about, it essentially ties into missing middle housing, which I would recommend if anybody is interested in just seeing like how the city is developing and which direction the city is going in. They have a whole handbook. It's like 4 handbooks where they did case studies, where they interviewed people in Sacramento, everything like that, which comes out to missing middle housing, and it's literally the policy that's guiding Sacramento's vision for the next 15 years, right? So they released like their 15-year plan, and their 15-year plan is essentially all focused on missing middle housing, right? So bills like SB 9, SB 1123, and ADU laws are all tools that make missing middle housing possible again. So again, what they're focused on is duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, townhomes, things like that. And a lot of people would be like, well, who wants to live in these areas, right? Like who would want to live in, these, why are they so focused on missing middle housing? Well, they did a study, and it turns out that about 51 million Americans prefer to live in an attached unit such as a missing middle housing, right? And it's only going to grow, I think, because the more people, like it's crazy, right? The more people that don't have kids, the less need they have for these big houses. So a lot of people are looking for community within actually themselves, right? Because like I said, it was a pretty crazy statistic that 85% of households are not going to have children by 2050, but that just shows like that's why this is going to become more popular, because people are looking for community outside of their household, right? So now they're looking for it in neighbors and things like that. So it is a desirable way for people to live. Again, also retirements, right? 1 in 5 Americans are going to be over 65 years old. They're not going to have a need for their big houses, and this missing middle housing is going to be a nice way for them to pretty much downsize instead of, because before, right, it was either single family home or you have your big apartments, and there was no in between. Now you can have detached ADUs, you can have courthouses, townhomes, things like that that pave the way for a little bit of more housing variety, right? More housing choices. So this is essentially where Sacramento is pushing towards, right? So it's going to be interesting to see in the next years how Sacramento implements this. I believe that there's going to be a lot of government subsidies that are going to come out, right, to kind of help enable developers to build these. The same thing that they did with ADUs, right, with the $40,000 grant that started at first, and then with the $80,000 grant that Napa's doing. And there's other areas as well that are doing a lot of grants for people to build these ADUs, right, to pick up the city slack and develop the housing. So that essentially concludes my presentation, right? So my point, for me, my desire always and my goal is always to incite people to get interested, to get excited about what's going on in Sacramento, and to go out and actually look at it themselves, right? Because there's so much that's going on, and there's so much that goes into these bills, and in the next 15 years, it's going to completely change the whole landscape of how our cities, how our communities are getting developed, how people are living. It's pretty exciting to be early to it, right? This is like, I always like to say, if you miss the Bitcoin run, this is possibly the second best that you'll get, right? Is you can get in and you can start learning about these bills, and you can be one of the first people that actually start incorporating these bills, right? The more knowledge you have about this, the easier it's going to be able to do it later on. Again, there are downsides of it right now, right? When you're early to something, of course, it's nice to be early, but also at the same time, it's not fully developed yet, right? Like the cities are still very slow, but at the same time, you get to get a lot more knowledge, and you get to get ahead of the curve, because I guarantee you, the same way that the ADUs, when they first came out, you know, it was like 1,000 ADUs permitted the first year, and then about after a couple of years, it was like 2-3 years, it was 100,000 ADUs that were permitted in California, right? So it started out with 1,000 ADUs that were permitted to 100,000 within the span of like about 3 to 4 years, right? So it 100x, so it picked up some steam, and I believe that the same thing is going to happen with these bills. Again, San Jose was just the first city to sell an ADU separately, and then now they have, like, I believe 3 that sold separately, but I believe the same way that Seattle is now selling 60% of all ADUs are built to sell, I believe that Sacramento and California, I believe that that's exactly where we're headed to as well. So again, it's nice to get ahead of the curve. It's nice to learn to see what's going on in the city and how you can take advantage of it, right? Whether you're an agent, whether you're just trying to take advantage of it by building, right, or investing, it opens up a whole new venture, a whole new avenue of real estate investing, as well as even if you're a real estate agent, right? Like a lot of people, they're going to be looking for these homes, right? So you're not just going to be selling regular homes. Now you're going to be selling ADUs and townhomes and things like that. So it's interesting to even, like, now I'm thinking about it, if you're an agent, right, you can essentially, if it does turn out to be 60% the same way that California or Seattle is selling ADUs separately, you can literally market yourself as like, oh, I know how to sell ADUs, right? Like you could be the first one on the scene, and you could be known as the person that's like, oh, I need to sell my ADU, I need to call this person. Like they're specialized in selling ADUs. Essentially, it's not much different, right? But since you could be first to the scene, you can pick up a lot of that initial traffic and help build your name, right, if you're an agent. So again, there's a lot of opportunity for all sides, whether you're an agent, whether you're an investor, whether you're a developer, or whether you're a builder. Again, this concludes my presentation. Thank you guys so much for your time. If there's any questions, feel free, either ask them now or after.
Any questions, folks?
Awesome, thank you.
Question.
Yeah.
What kind of service you provide with your company?
Yeah, so what we do is we essentially do, so we started out with just ADUs, right? That's our heavy focus, is what we've been doing, ADUs. But now, after we've gotten a few calls from some investors about these builds, and we started taking a deeper dive into these builds, we're almost pivoting a lot towards missing middle housing as well, because there's a lot of opportunity there. But for us, right now, it's obviously we build ADUs. So essentially we do design and engineering. We have a sister company called Golden State Design and Engineering. So we do all of the planning, we do all of the permitting, we do all of the construction. We make it pretty simple. We have 6 interior design bundles. We use the same products all across every single ADU build. We do offer actually a referral fee as well. So if you guys ever run into somebody that's looking to build an ADU, we do offer a referral fee. It's usually a $1,200 check written out to either your name or your company name, whatever you'd like prefer to write it out to. But yeah, so essentially we do every single one of these builds that you've seen. That is something that we are starting to brand ourselves with, because we want to be, like I was saying, we want to be first on the scenes, right? We want to be the specialist in these developments, and we want to help Sacramento kind of pick up these buildings, and we want to be the ones building them and helping the investors and whatnot.
Another question, how much approximately 750 square feet ADU, approximately per square feet?
Yeah. So the square footage is hard to say, right? So for example, if you have just a flat lot, your lot is ready to go, no site improvements, nothing like that, you can get a 750 square foot ADU for as cheap as $200,000. All in, and that's already excluding permit fees, right? Which permit fees are going to be about, depending on what area you're in, they could be anywhere from $7,000 to like $10,000. But a 750 square foot ADU, if you just get in and it's a relatively flat area, right? There's no demo, there's no trees that we need to remove, no utility upgrades, nothing like that. You can get it for as low as about $200,000 for the ADU, which is, I would say, pretty good price. And especially if you've ever seen our ADUs, they're very nice. A lot of people think that ADUs are just like little container homes. They're actually very, very nice homes. You know, we offer full tile finishes. Like once you come in, every time we have an open house or show the ADU to someone that just called in, they walk in and like, oh man, like I wasn't expecting this. A lot of people, they still think that ADUs are just like little tiny homes where it's just kind of, 4 walls and a sink, So a lot of people don't realize that ADUs are literally fully functional homes that are just smaller. Like the only difference between an ADU and a regular home is that it's literally just smaller, right? There's no other difference other than that.
Okay, how much per unit cost?
Again, it depends on the square footage and the city. 750, you'd be looking at about like 7,000 to 10,000 on permit fees. And you can get, so there's areas where you can get waived, right? So the lower you go in the square footage, the more fees you get to get waived. Also, some cities will impose different sorts of permits, right? So for example, in the Bay Area, the permits are a lot more, right? Here, it's a little bit cheaper, 7,000 to 10,000 with a 750 square foot ADU. If you're like 500 and under or 650 and under, you can be as low as 3,000 to 4,000 in permit fees. So it just depends. It all depends on the city and the jurisdiction that you're in. They literally all vary, so it's tough. Like we don't even really quote permit fees to people because it all depends on where you're at. And they change also. Like this whole market is still changing so quickly that it's like, even like with these bills, they'll pass the bill and then a month later they go and they completely revamp it and now it's like a whole new bill. So it moves very, very fast in this market right now. Yeah.
You said 200,000 for the home. Is that utilities, site work, everything?
So not site work. So that's what I was saying. So that in a perfect scenario, right? Because I can't estimate until I see a property. But in a perfect world, if everything is all ready to go, you'd be looking at about, for a 750 square foot ADU, you could get it for about $200,000. And it does include the utilities because the utilities, they interconnect, right? So the utilities, they interconnect. The water interconnects with the primary home. The sewer interconnects with the primary home, as well as the electrical also interconnects with the primary home. Yeah. Go ahead, whoever wants to go first.
What's the most common permit delays right now in Sacramento County?
The most common permit delays?
Yeah.
Honestly, the only permit delays that they'll have is usually if the department is getting ran very badly, to be completely honest. So we've had areas where we had to literally we'd bombard the building department. We're like, what is the holdup? And it'd be like, oh, we're either short-staffed or there's too many applications, we can't get to them. So a lot of times what they'll do is, because they have to get back to you, right, within 60 days. A lot of times what they'll do is they'll just send you a random correction, right? They'll just, because they don't have time to actually look over it and approve it. So they'll just look at it and be like, oh, just send it back and say this and this. And then they'll send it back. And you're like, well, that doesn't make any sense, right? But in their eyes, at least they sent it back. So now they made it past that, they got it within the 60 days, so now they have like a freebie. And that's actually what Gavin Newsom is cracking down on. That's why he created the HCD department. So I like that he did that. It makes it easier for us. Now we can go ahead and get them involved so they fight our battles. Because again, a lot of these bills, you'd be surprised. These cities, like they fight back. They fight back on these bills and they try to make it hard for you to go through. But there is ways to go through, and now with the HCD department, it's a lot easier. And they're going as far as finding these building departments. There's even ways that, like, if the building department doesn't get back to you within a certain time, you can actually go ahead and hire a third-party coordinator that can double check the permits and give you their approval if the actual building department is too slow. So they are pushing pretty heavily on it, and it just shows that they're aggressive. Like with this stuff, the state of California is trying to push this as much as they possibly can. So that's why I believe that it's only going to get easier and easier as we get closer to 2040, because that's their plan, right? This whole vision, it all pretty much stems from the 2040 plan. They created this plan like about 2 years ago, and that's all the city planners, they got together, they wrote it out. You can read it. It's like about 100 pages where it shows like this is how they're trying to develop Sacramento and the surrounding areas. Even, for example, like what's interesting, for example, say that there's like a Kohl's parking lot, right? So traditionally, it's a parking lot, you can't really do much on it. The city is trying to push for by 2040 that you can actually go ahead and develop on that parking lot. So now it's like a shopping center, and there's like some apartments, some townhomes, things like that. They're really trying to infill these kind of open areas as much as they can without still, going outwards to meet that housing demand.
Katie?
Yes. How would you price a home with an ADU?
So that's actually the hard part right now. So the hard part in Sacramento, and actually I'm happy that you actually brought this up. So there's two things actually that I want to talk about now. So the first one is how people do pricing, right? If you're to sell an ADU separately, or if you're to sell a house with an ADU on it already, right? So there's not a lot of comps right now at the time, because this bill to sell them, like for example, to sell them separately just got passed, but at the same time, the ADUs that were built at this time, right? The majority of them are people that are building it for themselves. They're not putting it on the market, right? It's families that are building it for mom, or it's mom that's building it for her son. So they're not, or it's renters or landlords that are building it to rent. So there have not been a lot of comps yet of people building it to sell. So obviously that's like one of those things that's going to fix itself as more and more people build ADUs and more people get into the market to build them specifically to sell. I think that's going to even itself out. But as of right now, it is pretty hard to get comps. So a lot of people, and I've talked to a lot of agents and even people that do the appraisals. So what they do is they have to go pretty far wide, right? So they have to go, to be like a 50-mile radius, because usually, right, when you do a comp, it's usually within the area of what it's selling for. So it is pretty difficult right now, because each ADU is a different square footage, right? Maybe this house sold with an ADU, but the ADU there was 600 square foot. But the ADU that you have is 1,200 square foot with the garage, So it's a little hard to do those comps. Again, I think that it's going to even itself out as the market builds more and more ADUs. So I wouldn't worry too much about that, but it is a little bit difficult. You'd have to do a pretty wide comparison of those. For example, in San Jose, when they sold it, this recently, I actually watched a video about it, is when they sold it. So they had I think it was like 1,000 square foot ADU. So it had its own driveway, it's had its own entrance, everything like that. So the way that they sold that one separately was they did a comparison of just a regular 1,000 square foot home of what it would cost to buy a 1,000 square foot home in that community, and that's how they were able to get an appraisal for that home, and they sold it for $1.6 million. So essentially they sold it as just a regular home, right, at that point. Going based off of that question again, actually, but it's more of like a financing question. A lot of these bills, what they're working on right now is because a difficulty that people ran into with a lot of these bills is that it's hard to get financing, right? It's hard because there's not a lot of traditional people that do financing that can finance these bills or these new construction projects, right? Like if you want to do an SB 1123 and you go and tell a lender that like, hey, I'm going to take this house, I'm going to develop 10 around it, they were pretty hesitant to do it in the beginning, right? So now I know even like Fannie Mae and like all these like big commercial like lenders, they're all starting to implement a lot of these ADU laws and a lot of these bills, but they're still working on this. And this is actually even something that in the 2040 plan, that's what the city planners were talking about. And they were also a little bit hesitant about it. I was like, okay, like when is the financing going to catch up to that, right? Because right now, if you go and tell a lender like, hey, I have a home here, but I'm going to tear it down and I'm going to build 4 more, they don't really know how to go about it, right? But again, I think with a lot of these things, it's going to get sorted out as more and more people enter the market for ADUs and the bills.
Any other questions?
Awesome. Again, good.
Have you done it SB9 last split? How long it take the process, and have you really done it in our area, like
So
San Jose or our area?
So we haven't done it in San Jose. We did do it in Sacramento. I need to double check with my partner because he did the lot split on the design and engineering side, William. So if you give me information, I can actually find out exactly how long it took and send it over to you. Because from the top of my head, I don't know because he worked that project.
I'm in 2 projects to do this process, and I have one project where it's 2 years and we're still in the process.
Oh, no way.
Requirements, but it's Mill Valley, not here.
Okay.
One is in
Yeah, so it shouldn't take 2 years.
The San Jose, whatever you mentioned, like the ADUs you're doing in multifamily,
Mm-hmm.
every ADUs what we do in the multifamily zoning, we treat it like multifamily. It's a hard requirements. It's like you building like high-rise apartment or a lot of like requirements by asking, you know.
Wait, sorry, say that again? If you're building an ADU?
If you're doing ADUs on the property, what you mentioned,
Okay.
like multifamily zoning, they consider each ADU what we're doing there like multifamily zoning, like
Oh,
apartment.
multifamily, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, for lending purposes, right? Is that what you're talking? Yeah, exactly, correct. Yeah.
Have you done it this type of process and how long it took? Because we are in South Jose right now, we have a project. We are already like 6 months already in the process.
To get financing or?
No, to do plans approved.
Yeah, so
ADUs, we have 2 ADUs on a lot.
2 detached?
Yes, detached.
Detached.
There is a multifamily 6 units on the lot, and we do 2 ADUs to that lot. But they treat it like multifamily, like apartment complex, and like it's commercial building and a lot of requirements. The process takes already 6 more months, and we don't know when we're gonna finish. Still,
So-
still all this.
Are you fighting with the city, like in the time, like are you like pushing kind of on them? Because a lot of times they will. They'll try to find the easiest way and they'll prolong your project. You really have to, like that's the thing with these bills is they're so new that you sometimes, like we've had projects even in San Jose, or not San Jose, in Walnut, where they tried to deny us and they were holding up the permits to the point where we had to actually get into the code book ourselves, find the codes, highlight them, email that to them. And then also what you can do is if they're taking too long and they're giving you trouble, what you can do actually is you can reach out to the HCD department. So that's literally their job. It's a whole task force that's meant to literally combat situations like that. When the city's giving you a hard time, you get the HCD department involved and they go ahead and they start fighting that battle for you to try to push them through. Because cities will do that. Again, because these bills are so new, cities will try to hold you up in permitting for a long time. They don't really know how to navigate it either. So a lot of times like they're imposing things that aren't even, like I said, like even HOA departments, everyone's kind of, they're throwing in their own 2 cents that are not right. And if you don't really know how to fight it, you're just going to be in that constant battle with them. And they're eventually, you know, they're going to slow down your project or they're going to win and not even be able to build it at all. You know, so I would recommend getting the HCD department involved because that is taking a long time, especially if there's a lot of, you know, things that they're, like if everything's by the book, like if you've done everything correctly, you should be able to go ahead and get that started. So a lot of times the building departments, they just don't know. You know, like I said, a lot of the people there, they're just working there and they don't really take the time to keep up with all the new changes, right? They'll get a new change that their boss tells them and they're not really too sure how to go about it. So we've had a lot of situations where we would be emailing the county back and forth and they're telling us one thing and we're like, hold on a minute, that's not at all what the bill says, right? So then we'd have to go out, pull the bill, highlight, send it back to them, and it's like a back and forth fight with them. Sometimes even with fees. Sometimes they'll try to impose fees on you that they can impose, right? But if you don't know that they can't impose them, then you just pay them, right? So that's why it is important to read those codes and kind of go over it. It depends on what they're fighting and what the reason they're telling you that they're holding it up for, and then that's kind of how you can start uncovering that and finding for a way to really fight them. But I would recommend HCD department. That's what I would recommend. Get the HCD department involved, and that helps a lot. We've gone the HCD department involved in a couple different cases, and they help a ton. Like as soon as they get involved, it usually kind of speed runs the process.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier, like one more question regarding the ADU, can build like 2 ADU on a property, it's a possibility or it depends on
Yeah, so it depends. So it depends on which bill you use, right? If you're just doing a regular ADU, then you're limited to 1 detached ADU, 1 conversion, and 1. Yeah, exactly. But for example, if you do SB9, and again, right now it depends on how the city's interpreting it. But if you do an SB9, technically the state bill allows you to build. You have 1 home, you can build another home, which is a primary. It's not an ADU, and each one can get an ADU. So this is actually a project that we're working on doing right now, actually in Walnuts for an SB9. And the guy's actually doing an interesting project actually because he has 1 property on there. He's going to do an SB9, so he's going to get another property on there. Then each property is going to get its own ADU, but then also he's going to go ahead and do an attached ADU on each property too. So it's absolutely insane like what they're working on there, but it's fun. You know, it's fun to see it. It's still a new concept too. So we fight cities back and forth like that all the time because they're pretty hesitant. You know, they see these plans come in and they're like, hold on a minute. You know, this is single family zone. This guy's putting 4. They don't really know how to go about it. So sometimes you do have to fight them. Yeah, go ahead.
So if there's HOA, probably possible to do ADU, yeah?
No, we're building in like, I think 4 or 5 different HOA communities right now. You can still build. So even with what I was saying with fees, right? Like we had an HOA community that tried to impose about 12, I don't remember exactly the number. It was like $10,000 or $12,000 that they tried to charge the homeowner to build an ADU. But Gavin Newsom signed a bill, literally it's like AB 130, I believe, that said that that HOA communities can't charge excessive fees like that to pretty much dismotivate you to build it, right? And also we have another project, for example, Lodge Court, right? Where they were giving the lady a very, very hard time to allow her to build an ADU. She was on a time crunch because she was like, this is the only lot available. I just sold my house. I need to buy this lot, but I'm not buying this lot until I can find out that I can put an ADU on it. So we were going back and forth with them too, and they're like, oh no, our community doesn't allow ADUs. You know, we don't do ADUs, and we had to go ahead and pull up those codes. Where it's like, hey, just because it's an HOA, like you don't have governing authority to say that you can't build an ADU. They can put CC&Rs on it, right? Like you can't, if every house has tile, your ADU needs to have tile, or if every house is this color, the ADU needs to be this color, but they can't tell you outright you can't build. You can build an ADU essentially anywhere in California, at least one. All right, again, thank you guys so much. Thank you.
Dennis, can you take one more question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. The question is, can we use from the backyard or we can build from the front yard?
Yeah, so that good question. So very good question. The question was, can you only build it in the backyard or can you do the front yard? So we've done side yard ADUs, which was pretty easy. Front yard ADUs, you can build it. There's just different setbacks. So it can, depending on the city, right? So typically, I'm actually working a deal right now that's, they want to put it in the front. So the way that it works is, usually it'll either be like a 15 or 20 foot setback, right, from the front. But if you can prove that you can't put it in the back, right? The back is just, there's no space. You can get reduced setbacks in the front and build up to 800 square feet. So if you do have the space in the back, then you wouldn't be able to utilize that, right? Because you'd have to prove to them, because they'll come out and they'll take a look, and you'd have to prove to them like, oh, I just can't put it in the back. But if your back is, there's just no room and you can't fit an ADU that's at least 800 square feet, you can go ahead and build it in the front with reduced setbacks. So now those 15 foot setback or 20 foot setback is not going to apply, and now you can get much closer to accommodate that ADU. So they want to allow any property to at least build one ADU, whether it's in the back, front, or side. So there are a lot of ADUs getting built in the front as well.
What do you think, folks? Very empowering, wasn't it? Thank you so much. So let's give them a big round of applause. A lot of information, folks. Two things I want to bring up real quick. Number one, for investors or otherwise, for your own capital wealth or otherwise, ADUs, beautiful picture. Agents, get used to it. It's something that Sacramento's going to be hit broadside with in a very short time. Get to know the power of it. We have a office listing at 4401 El Camino if you want to take a look at it. It has a duplex, 2 ADUs, and 2 junior ADUs on one piece of property. That looks very, very nice, laid out beautifully. So a lot of information. Move towards it, understand it, because the market needs you, okay? We have now come to a point, go ahead, hit the button, Kim. Salamita will bring us up on the latest great news on the interest rate. Oh,
thank you, Dennis, and thank you, Val, for such a great presentation on ADUs. I learned so much today on all of the new laws. Hi everyone, my name is Salamita Scotts. For those who may not know me, I work with AFC Mortgage. We're a mortgage company based here in Sacramento, and I'm also one of the in-house lenders here at USKO Realty. And today I want to talk about a creative way you can use a HELOC to finance an ADU. And what a HELOC is a home equity line of credit. A HELOC is essentially a second loan secured on your home that allows you to access your equity. And this is really nice because if you have a very low interest rate on your first mortgage, maybe you refinance during COVID and you have like a 3 or 4% interest rate, you actually can get a second loan without having to touch the first mortgage. And you can access up to 90% of the home value, depending on your credit and the program. And the minimum credit score you want to have is about a 680. And rates do vary depending on your credit score and how much money you're pulling from your equity, but it ranges between 9 to 12%. And once you've completed your ADU, you can use the rental income to offset the HELOC payment, and it will boost the long-term value of your property and generate that extra income. So if you want to see if your home is eligible for a HELOC, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm more than happy to run this scenario for you. And now we will have a quick presentation from Stefan.
Sacramento is a great city, you know. So I find out that Sacramento is most sunny city in America, you know. This is in good place, you know. This is good time to develop our real estate business. Yeah, always opportunity here right now. This is, I built just last year, I built ADU, you know. Yeah, if you now have guests or any families, you know, come in. You know, in case if my wife scream on me, I can go and do there. Okay, you can stop by in our house. You can see how we can build 750 square feet ADU. This is great. It's not very expensive, you know, when you build. Yeah, and this one we are here to serve you here. Any questions, always stop by here for coffee. You know, we have great people here. We have great mentor, Dennis here. Right now we work under his supervision because he's really good experience. He's real American because we immigrant. We still learning. We have really good people here. We have Agnesa. She born here in America, you know, this is for her much easier, you know. And we have Mark here, you know, he always smile, he very good, he make a nice coffee here, you know. Biggest assets what we have is people here. We have Tanya Gisson just came, and this is a title company, if any problem, anything. We have real estate attorney, two real estate attorney here in our office, we well protected. In case we are here, we build our community, we have great builders here, people, we have Val here, we have Lot here, he just working on our flipping right now. We are here to serve you, stop by anytime for coffee, or we have gutter, anything gutter here, yeah. Yes, gutter guys, anything here. We have all people here, it's great people here. Welcome anytime, stop by for coffee, visit us, be more than happy to serve you. You know, we want to serve to our people, to our community. Thank you for coming, God bless you, have a good day. Yeah, thank you again.